Good evening, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to our panel. We'll get started here in just a moment. My name is Roger Day. I've been doing panels for a few years here at Matsuricon. So glad you all came out to mine. Then I could introduce my co-panelists. Go ahead.
Use the mics.
Hi, I'm Madeline Monroe. I have never done a panel before, and Roger has been nice enough to be like, hey, I'm doing a thing. Do you want to help me do the thing? And I was like, okay, I'll try. So we're really excited to do our first panel tonight.
My name is Melinda Branford. This is also my first panel. So again, Roger asked us to help out, and fairies and Irish folklore are kind of my thing. So I was like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. So hope you guys enjoy it.
You may or may not know us. We've been to OhioCon Matsuricon before as artists too. We were the Unhinged Twins. So we're not con famous, but we like to pretend.
Oh, there you go.
Really? Yep. I need it.
Alright. So in the world of the Ancient Magus Bride, there are many different fairies, all of which have real-world roots, at least that we can tell so far. So we're going to get into those roots tonight, what Yamazaki has found all her inspiration. We're going to talk about all the main characters, side characters, as many as we can get into, and we're going to save Elias for last. So Chisei Hattori is actually... Oh,
Yeah, that's okay.
I forgot that I came out.
That's all right. All I sought was a convenient human to play at being my apprentice. Although I myself am not human, the other mages still would not stop nagging me to train a successor. I often thought of humans as a hassle or an annoyance, but I was curious about how their minds work. So I thought I'd buy a random human and observe it for a time. And that would be that. But then I came across a truly rare specimen, and oddly enough, it rapidly grew attached to me. But she does not speak much. She sometimes opens her mouth, then quickly closes it without saying a word. Each time I see that, two distinct feelings well up within me, neither of which I can identify.
So Chisei Hattori is referred to as a slave baggy. In this story, we all know that Chisei is just a human, though, and she's born with the ability to generate her own magic power and absorb existing magic around her. So, unfortunately, this is very strenuous on her human body, and she's not expected to live very long. But it is noted in the story that she's named after a very old type of fairy. Real slave baggies are fairies that they come from the Isle of Man. They're typically shy, they're temperamental, they're easy to anger. They don't like things like salt or ash, but they're described as nude, childlike, and have crow-like feet. Their nicknames are actually squinters. I'm not really sure if that has anything specifically to do with the fact that Chisei has the power of sight, why she decided to name her after them, but maybe. The underlying theme in the story involves a lot of growth and development, and Chisei's transition from her first life to her new life with Elias is just the beginning of it. So throughout this story, change and growth was very easy to depict through different types of fae. Most of them are actually very subject to change based on behavior and their environment around them and their powers.
So an example of change would be Ruth, the Grimm. They're also known as church Grimms or Kirk Grimms. They sometimes have origins primarily in England and Scandinavia. They appear as black dogs. Sometimes they're seen as rams, horses, roosters, ravens, even small, misshapen, dark-skinned people in some lore. They're spirits that oversee and protect churches or graveyards. The Swedish Kyrkogrim is said to be the spirit of a sacrificed animal at a building of a new church by early Christians. In some parts of Europe, it was said that the soul of the first buried in a church graveyard was going to guard the place from the devil. So instead of using a human soul, they would actually bury a black dog alive in the northern part of the yard before a human was actually buried in the graveyard. So Ruth's origin is similar with the historical folklore. He died in a churchyard waiting for his sister to wake up. As a note, the black dogs are not always church Grimms though. Sometimes they're just heralds of death and malevolent spirits or hellhounds and things of that nature. He's so pretty.
I'll have to confess, I resisted the temptation to throw in Led Zeppelin's Black Dog. But Fae are subject to change, and Silky is a prime example. Former Banshee, now Brownie. But Banshees are Irish female Fae, known for to wail nocturnal laments for the death of the members of prominent Irish families. The list you can see here, the list expanded over the course of time. Usually heard at night and not seen, they are described as women in black cloaks and are capable of taking forms of crows, hares, and other creatures of Irish witchcraft lore. Brownies are Fae with English and Scottish origins. They are small, doll-like, and typically male household spirits who enjoy cleaning and other chores for families that treat them kindly and respectfully. It's important to be neighborly to a neighbor. And Silky's 4 facts about me, how to be a good neighbor. Can I help with that?
Sure.
Here you go.
4 facts about me. I never accept any gifts or tokens of gratitude.
While Fae like being appreciated, they don't want to be obligated to anyone. Give a Fae a gift, and you receive one too, whether you want it or not.
I make certain to be seen as rarely as possible.
Fae, especially brownies, practice how not to be seen amongst humans.
I do play the occasional prank. Please forgive me.
Brownies can be mischievous, so it's important not to get too uptight about harmless pranks.
Any cream left upon the mantelpiece is intended for me.
Some Fae like sweet treats like honey, porridge, cream, and cookies. If families disrespect a brownie by trying to bribe it, treat it as an employee, or just being rotten, they can become bogarts, rowdy, destructive, and spiteful spirits that can wreak havoc on homes, especially if there are multiples of them. Now, the thing interesting about Silky is that she's also sort of named after a... Silky would be a different yet uncommonly term name for Selkie, such as Mertuli here. However, Silky is not a Selkie. So, Selks are common in Celtic, Scottish, and Irish legends. They live as seals, but can remove their pelt to become human. Many stories involving Selkies are romantic and tragic. Lover becoming possessive to hide the Silky's pelt so they can't leave, or the Silky returns to the sea and they're never seen again. But a lot of times that they were homebound, they married and stayed there. Some say the term Silky specifically refers to the dresses that they wear. They're so quick about the housework, so their silk dresses, lighting is all you can hear. So, yeah, and Lindell's familiar
Vertuli is also a. I love the fact how he seems to sing
sing
all of
songy.
his. Yes. So. You're next.
Spriggan. He's the character that helps Sylvie find her new home and make her change into a brownie. Spriggans are typically small creatures and they have Cornish origins. They're described as extremely ugly, short men, but they have the ability to grow enormous in size if they feel the need to. It's believed it's either because they are the descendants of or the ghosts of giants. This is supposedly the reason for that, so we're not really sure. They have a fondness for treasure, wearing stone-covered clothing, so they're often depicted as thieves or guards. They're thought to cause sickness, bad weather, they'll lead travelers astray, they even kidnap children, and in some cases they'll leave their own in place, just like changelings. Changelings, like the character Shannon. She appears throughout many lore, legends, and different religions even. The term can refer to any type of fae infant that's swapped with a human's child. But sometimes the human babies aren't even switched with fae, but enchanted pieces of wood or rocks that appear to sicken and die. Fairies and like are often very vain, so usually whenever they take babies, they think they're very pretty, and they'll leave their own ugly children in place. Sometimes they're benevolent though, and if there is a sick and dying human baby, they will take it so that the parents don't have to suffer the loss of a child. They will also leave their old to be cared for before they die. Shannon was switched with a human baby and lived with humans for almost 50 years before she went to live in Tirnanog. The human baby she was swapped with is Shanahan. He grew up with the fairies, so he eventually changed into a fae himself. He's described as a centaur in the official guidebook, but that's a misnomer. Centaurs, by definition and etymology, are actually half horse and half human, kind of like the male carrier Hazel. They have Greek origins, and they're born of Ixion and Nephili, or potentially their son Centaurus. It's debatable about which was the actual first centaur. But Shanahan would probably be more appropriately named a Lycatar, because he's half wolf, half man.
Going back to Shannon and Spriggan a little bit, they immediately serve underneath Titania and Oberon, Queen and King of Fairies, and the rulers of Tirnanog. Titania is the queen, married to Oberon. He's a very playful jerk. I love him. The name Titania is associated, of course, with the character from William Shakespeare's A Midsummer's Night Dream. But the title of the Fairy Queen has a broad spectrum of history and lore. In traditional lore, the queen actually has no name. Shakespeare named her after the daughter of Titans in Ovid's work Metamorphosis. Oberon's name has lore that dates back further, about 300 years or so before Shakespeare. He's an elven character in the French epic song Huon of Bordeaux. Real quick on their character design, I want to point out I really enjoy their character design and the duality of nature. Oberon has a very fauna look to him, whereas Titania has a floral sort of look. And I think that it kind of goes back to Midsummer Night's Dream, where Oberon had two fairy servants that were Moth and Cobweb, and then Titania had two fairy servants that were Peas, Blossom, and Mustard Seed, so it kind of plays on that duality. And I enjoy that she kept a design that was similar to that between the two of them. With Tirnanog, it is a place out of Irish mythology. It means the land of the young. It's at least part of the other world. It's described as a land of beauty, of health, abundance, joy, eternal youth, of course. It's home to the Tuatha De Danann, the people of the goddess of Danu. They are gods and deities of pre-Christian Gaelic Ireland. They said they would become the Aishi, which are fairies and elves of the human world in later folklore. But Titania and Oberon are not the only ones with great power. There are the Dark Lady and the Horned God. People that are familiar with the manga or even just general neo-paganism will recognize them. Their identities are glossed over in the anime. The few scenes that they were in were pretty much left silent. The Horned God has ties to Wiccan and neo-paganism lore, which dates back to the early 1900s. The term Horned God, however, has many blended origins and includes several deities from other religions and beliefs. In common Wicca, he's associated with nature, sexuality, the cycle of life, and hunting. But Yamazaki's interpretation is physically opposite of the traditional descriptions. Traditionally, he has the body of a man and the head of a deer, but she had swapped that to have the body of the deer and the torso of a man. The Dark Lady is most likely a representation of the triple goddess. She takes on 3 forms: maiden, mother, and crone. Even throughout the anime and the manga, she does this too. Represents 3 major parts of the life cycle. It's an embodiment of earth and bounty, personification of motherhood. She's a simpler concept to the triple goddess, which again is kind of representing those different stages in life. But again, going back to sort of to the flora and fauna, they have that sort of a appearance too, with the horned god having more of the animalistic nature, whereas the Dark Lady is a little more flowery looking. So
Next on our list is the Lavanshi, female fairies from Celtic lore, generally depicted as beautiful women with a mystical and irresistible charm. They offer themselves as a muse for exchange for love and devotion, which often leads to an artist's premature death or insanity. This was W.B. Yeats, poet, Irish poet, kind of codified this vampiric effect that they have. If they'll ask for the love of a human, if they're refused, she must become their slave. Otherwise, they belong to her. They can only escape if they find someone else other than themselves. They'll drain their life away. Chisei actually wound up giving she has a name, but it's not noted in the actual manga. I mean, the anime, beg your pardon. But it's an interesting, and I'm sure, maybe we should have said, this thing is riddled with spoilers. We probably should have said that, but this is definitely...
We kind of more gloss over the spoilers. We don't out and out go, this person dies, or something like that, but...
Yeah, but even so, the story arc with the old man Joel and the Lavanshi that's been haunting his house for, ever since he's lived there, is a very sweet, sad, sweet story, and it's like, but
talk about
just yes.
Like that.
So, but it's a very interesting take to see a fae actually develop a more human-like emotion. I believe in the manga at one point she says, "I don't love him because if I did, I would devour him."
Yes.
So
they have a very different concept of love, just in generalization. Fairies are very childlike and possessive, whereas humans, we think of things much more romantic. It's very different.
yes. So now we go into Will-O-Wisp. And I will just say this, if we're going to do the what's better, the manga or the anime, I will just say that in the anime, Will-O-Wisp really comes alive and he's an awesome character to watch.
And he's adorable.
And yes, this just ties into the thing of, yes, they like blonde, prefer blondes. So, but they're also known as fairy lanterns, jack-o'-lanterns, ghost lights, etc., etc. And in the UK, they're not necessarily fairies. Think of them more as like light trails from where they've gone. Sometimes they're depicted as small creatures that carries lanterns or coal. They say that they lead travelers away off their path, sometimes on a destructive path. Now in the U.S., we've tried to explain away all this phenomenon just scientifically. Who needs that? You know.
I'm sure you've all heard of bog lights to a certain extent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's like, but they're fascinating characters, and I should also add in the manga, it's implied in Will-O-Wisp sometimes have the task of guiding spirits to where they need to go after death, which is one of the reasons why they hang about cemeteries. So
again, there's malevolent versions and nicer versions of them, depending on what story you're reading.
yes.
oh hey, the Marians.
Yes.
Marians.
Yes.
They're seen in Shannon's hospital scene, and then also visiting Silky in the manga. They're of Cornish legend. Marian just literally translates to ant, which they are. Some say that they're actually the souls of heathens who are too good for hell, but since they're non-believers, they're not good enough for heaven. So that's why it's considered bad luck to actually step on ants, because it might be the soul of a human that's trapped inside. Other people believe that they're just shapeshifters who shrink each time they use their power until they become the size of ants.
So cute.
Yes.
Now the gremlins, they're seen tinkering in Elias's kitchen. they're actually really young in origins. They only came around in the 1920s with early airplanes, actually. It was this whole superstition because of sabotage. And actually, that's what got their name gremlin. It came from an Old English term, gremian, which meant to vex. So, some people claim that they're older, but they're similar to imps and goblins, but with a lot of modern uses in words like this, they're kind of interchangeable.
Now we have dragons, and they have many roots and origins. We have depictions dating back to the Mesopotamian era, 2,000 plus years back. But what we're most common with is the medieval versions from the 10 to 1500s. And they tend to be large, serpent-like, some with wings, some without, and multiple and legs or lack thereof, plenty. Some people would compare them with dinosaurs now. Yamazaki-san has 3 different types. There's the Uger, which are the earth dragons. They're very stocky and quadrupedal. And most recent generations have lost the ability to fly. Evan, who is one of the very old dragons, still had, at least in theory, the capacity. And that's just an awesome piece of art.
So he remembered being able to fly at least.
Correct. And it's just a great piece of art. That's the one
that.
thing.
I love
This
that.
is why you should read the manga, because the art is amazing too. So it's either way, you're doing good. But then you've got the other 2. They are the Gauf, which are wind creatures. They're bipedal. They have no arms, but large wings. And they're similar to weaverns, what we would think of when we think of weaverns. And then we've got the Biana, which is, they're kind of like they live in crags. And, they're kind of raptor-like, and they have fur, and they're great runners and climbers. There are still, but dragons are magical creatures, and even though they seem to be in decline, they still have the capacity to become very powerful, destructive beasts if the need arose. Almost of a throwback, but
Now, the woolly bugs. Winners in the series. And the mandrakes. They're a couple of useful creatures that you can find on Elias's property. Woolly bugs don't have a specifically given origin. I think they're just inspired by they're actual insects. They're called woolly aphids, but they have the nicknames fluff bugs and fairy flies. There are snow bugs even, and fluffy gnats. But again, I don't see this being confirmed anywhere. Mandrakes, specifically, we could all quote Hermione Granger, Mandragora. The roots of these plants were used in old traditional medicines, and it was very common to accidentally poison patients, actually. They're also used in amulets for luck. It was a common legend, of course, that when you pulled them out of the ground, it was a man-shaped fruit, and if you heard it, it would scream, and damn you to hell. Obviously, these ones are much cuter.
Yes. Hugo, Angelica's familiar, is known to be a Vodanyai. In Eastern Slavic tales, physical description is very different from his real-world counterpart. Legends depict Vodanyai as naked old men in algae and mud, frog-like faces, long hair and beards, webbed fingers, scaly skin, a fish's tail, and red eyes. In Czech, South and West Slavic, they are described very human-like, but with green hair and skin, gills, and webbed fingers. And actually, I just need to throw in, sounds like Puddleglum the Marsh Wiggle from Chronicles of Narnia. But they tend to stay in the water, but can leave for short periods of time, and are distinguishable by their constantly wet clothes. Some Vodanyai are good, and some not so much.
All right, so we're going to speculate a little bit here. The Ariels, they could be named after Shakespeare's Ariel in The Tempest. They're probably based on pixies, most like. They're typically small, beautiful, and childlike in their descriptions. They're said to live underground, in mounds, stone circles, and things like that. But modernly, the term pixie is sometimes just synonymous with fairy in general. Like most magical creatures, their definition is kind of up to the author or artist, and Yamazaki's, of course, are these more bird-like versions.
Kind of like slave babies.
Yeah. So whether or not the Ariels have a truly specific rooted inspiration, we don't know, but considering their race is only referred to as fairy, they still fall underneath the category of sylph, which is technically one of the 4 elemental types of beings. We're going to get into some alchemy a little bit here because of Paracelsus's work on philosophy. There are other creatures that Yamazaki's put in the series that we haven't gotten to yet, but we're going to identify them as elementals. So Paracelsus worked on these categorizations, and he had this book here that he wrote.
Nymphs, pygmies, salamanders, and other spirits.
Which kind of gave it to this archetypal creature. There's undines for water, there's sylphs for wind, gnomes for earth, and of course salamanders for fire. His work was the building blocks for all of this alchemical and magical study, theory, and observation. But many of the terms that we're using are just going to be these broad range.
No way was I going to make them read the author's name of that book. So.
I looked at that and I was like, holy crap. Someone really liked a lot of names and couldn't pick just one for their kid.
You got me. I even have Spanish.
Oh, was that it for you guys?
Oh, yeah, the
Oh,
salamander.
the salamanders.
Because we all like the salamanders. So
Except
Yes.
fire
I need
types.
one.
they're elementals.
Those are
Technically a fire type, that's probably why he likes hanging out at the
Yeah.
castle so much.
Who would like a plush of this guy? Because how
There are
amazing would
not
that
enough
be?
plushes for this series in general, can I just say that?
Yeah.
I love that it's
This is
It's
gonna
gonna end real fast right now.
I didn't do
talk about something a little bit later.
That's enough cute for that.
There's never enough cute.
We're gonna move on to one of the creepiest creatures.
Yay.
This creature is entirely undefined in origin. Some of its characteristics, such as their clothing, Chise makes a remark that they smell like sand, and Elias claims they're a millennia old. This may suggest Middle Eastern origin predating Islamic influence. In some variations of the jinn, they're Arabian godlike spirits. They were later acknowledged by the religion as human-like, but they didn't actually think they were immortal. There were tribes of jinn. They were the Sila, Ifrit, Marid, and Ghul. They each had varying depictions in habit and appearance. Because they're very high intelligence, they can be good, they can be bad, they can be neutral. And Ashina is definitely somewhere on that spectrum.
He's the asshole of the spectrum.
I wouldn't say it's that, but yeah, kind of.
He's somewhere in there.
So, ghouls tend to be female, live in graveyards, eat corpses, can shapeshift, and are known to lure travelers to their dooms. And, oh yes, they have cloved feet. So, Sila are a clever and rare breed of jinn who use illusions to manipulate people. Ifrit can be male or female, winged or not, and are often cloaked in or made of smoke. Theirs is a highly structured subterranean society. They are susceptible to magic, making it easier to enslave or kill them by those means. Myriads are powerful, egotistical, sea-dwelling jinn, who I forgot I put in that old D&D book. Powerful, egotistical, sea-dwelling jinn. While they can grant wishes, they need to be approached with flattery, rituals, or they need to be subdued or enslaved. Arabic cultures use jinn as a catch-all for other demon spirits or alien tribes. Ashina may be a jinn in this broad context. This caption here is pretty good indication that we might be on the right track. A gift to the child of those who bind us. Well, mortals tend to try to bind jinn, so this may track. However,
You're definitely a weirdo.
yes. Now perhaps Ash and I might be a nod to weird fiction writer H.P. Lovecraft. With her use of old primal entities too alien for humans to perceive without threatening their health or sanity. Even though she usually uses this motif to evoke mystery and awe instead of horror, it's still there in her work. Just look at the next panel there. Did you see it? Not clearly. Good. But Yamazaki-san definitely borrowed H.P. Lovecraft's Village of Ulthar, where no man may kill a cat, from his short story The Cats of Ulthar. And she reworked it in a very satisfying way. So it's it's one of the better arcs, and it does have moments of Lovecraftian horror as well as his, when he wanted to do fantasy, he could do it. And I think, man, we're ready for Elias himself. And yes, as a point of order, I will say I pronounce it Elias because I believe Ainsworth is, he might not be human, but he's ostensibly British because he lives there. So in English, it'd be Elias. She would definitely call him Elias because, well, she's Japanese.
I say Elias just because of how it is spelled in Japanese, like all the vowels come out the same way, and even in English it can be either or. It's not incorrect either or.
No, but that's why I'm, so if you're wondering why I'm peculiar, that's why.
I second the alliance, that's how I say it.
It's fine. So Elias himself is very strange. He has a few aliases though. We know him as Pila Moralis, Liathanam, and Thorn. We don't really know if any of these are specific hints to him, but let's talk about each of these. So Pila Moralis is a German used word actually. It means wall spear. And in the Roman Empire, they were fences made of large wooden stakes that would border military camps and the like. But the proper word for stake was actually studus. So this might actually have something to do with his personality. He tends to wall himself in and keep others at arm's length. It's actually also very similar to his name Thorn. So that kind of ties in with his powers. He always has thorns as a motif in all his magic. There's also, it has symbolism to represent sin, hardship, and there's a legend in Christianity actually that there was a robin that plucked a thorn from the crown of Jesus' head to ease his pain. That's supposedly why red robins have the red on their chest is blood from Christ actually. And again, Yamazaki never claims to take anything specifically from Christianity, but again, we're playing off his names. Like, Chisei is nicknamed Robin off and on throughout the story.
And just red hair. Roses and thorns.
Yeah. And she obviously is helping Elias out, like, through the story, like, learn about humans and emotions, so.
If you don't mind my just throwing in, when I did my first Ancient Magus Bride panel 2 years ago, when there was just 3 volumes of the manga and the OVAs had not even come out yet, I was drawing analogies of the Song of Solomon. It's so you can make comparisons all sorts of ways. So I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine. Now, Liatanam, it's just a Gaelic term. It just means gray soul. So whenever Oberon was referring to him as this, he was basically just calling Elias old in a pretty way. So it doesn't really mean anything. But there are a few theories, like I'm sure everyone here has probably read something or has ideas of their own. So we're going to talk about at least 3 of them. Then we might get a chance to all kind of talk together, but we'll see. One of them I've seen is the Chimera, also the Wendigo. I have not heard of anyone claiming this yet, but the Urisk, so we were excited to talk about him tonight too. So we're going to talk about the Chimera first.
Okay. So, a Chimera is originally described in Homer's Iliad, a thing of immortal make, and not human, lion-fronted, snake behind, goat in the middle, and soaring out the breath of the terrible flame, bright fire. So, this still is the most iconic version. The variations crop up in other fictional spirits, and anyone who's seen FMA Brotherhood is definitely aware of what.
Why would you bring up that?
But I'll just mention, creatures like Shadoo and Sphinxes might be a kind of chimera if you want to play it that way. However, but I'll have to say, Cartophilus here did create a very disturbing chimera himself, just as a casual experiment. And he would have liked to have made one with a Fae component, putting him in opposition to Chisei. They fought over Ruth. But here's the thing. Interestingly, if Elias is a chimera, would he be a strange Fae human hybrid? If he were, wouldn't Cartophilus have noticed or mentioned it? Then he would achieve the result, that he had received the results that he wanted. But one thing is certain, that every Fae Ainsworth meets senses both fae and human traits in him.
He's a weirdo too.
Oh, yes, and yeah.
Now we're going to talk about the Wendigos. A little less popular, but they're Native American and Algonquin. They're thought to either be malevolent spirits or human-turned creature by cannibalism. Wendigos are often portrayed as predatory creatures. They hunt humans, they're damned and nearly immortal. They have the ability to perfectly mimic any of their prey. A couple of those qualities match up with Elias, like his human-like qualities, his ability to shapeshift, and he has vague memories of having eaten people before. But Rahab, his teacher's teacher, basically threw that human-turned creature part of the theory out the window, because she once said, the obvious answer would be that this is some idiot mage or alchemist who dabbled in black magic and got caught up in the backlash of their spell. So it seems like this theory's kind of short-lived. Still interesting, and who knows?
You know?
Now we're going to talk about the Orisk. This is a different idea. This is a Scottish fairy. This is hard for us to dig up a lot of information on this, but I really like this one. Scottish fairy that haunts ponds or other pools of water. They're described as peculiar looking, and most stories describe them as men with long faces and limbs, legs of a goat. Some legends are even unable to just describe them at all. They're said to be sad and misunderstood creatures with hopefulness of friendship and sympathy. This is reminiscent of some of Elias's underlying personality traits, and even that scene where Elias was trying to reform his body, and Chise and Ruth found him in a pond. This isn't even though a 100% solid theory. This is a less than commonly known fairy. So I don't know if Yamazaki is just trying to trick us or make us think certain things, but even Titania and Oberon say they don't know what Elias actually is. So a lot of the theories just fall flat just because of those two not comprehending what he is. Some people even say that, you know, maybe he's some kind of a demon, which would argue that demons don't actually fall underneath the same category as fae. There's been theories that we've read about where he's a demon-human hybrid, but your guess is as good as ours as far as this goes, but I'm sure that Yamazaki will actually show and say what he is at some point in time, which would be fantastic. So I don't know about all y'all, but I'm excited for a big reveal at the end or something. So
We'll get back around to it eventually. I would like to think it's kind of important.
Certainly. So, Al, we're going to do one last thing before we kind of open up the floor a little bit. This worked very well in my first panel a couple years ago, so I insisted we do one. We're going to do a dramatic reading from a scene in Ancient Magus Bride, and
so dramatic.
hope that you enjoy it.
It's so beautiful. It's so much fun. Wait, what was I again? It doesn't matter. Where should I go? I feel like I could go anywhere. I could go far away until I'm the only thing there. But I hear someone calling me, almost shouting in my ear.
Chise, are you truly going to leave?
Yes, I'm being called.
Are you all right with that?
Yes, I am.
Well, if that's true, I'll accompany you. But are you sure you're not leaving anything behind?
Leaving something. Wait, what?
Chise. Chise, wait. There's still many things I don't understand. Without you here to teach me, I won't know what to do.
You won't?
No, I won't. I'll be cold and also lonely.
Yeah. I don't like being cold either. Elias, let's go home.
And this took too long for the thing to go up. It's like, thus ends another day in Mr. Ainsworth's neighborhood.
That
any questions or thoughts on anything? that we
Anything
discussed?
that we like missed or you just want to ask? What do we got here?
I have a question as far as like, because you said we're hoping to figure out what he is later on. So from the anime to the manga, is the anime plan going past where the, or not the anime, is the manga plan going past where the
The manga is already past it, actually. Yes, we're starting the college arc. Elias and Chise are actually going to the Alchemist's College now. Chise is still all right for the most part. Her arm's not great, but she's hanging in there.
I don't think we're getting the translation of, I think for another couple months yet.
I was going to say, I know the volumes are at least one behind from where the anime was, so the next one should catch up to the anime, and then after that we'll start getting new content. The anime, I would like to think, would continue after that, but it's Wit Studio, who also do Attack on Titan, and we know they like to take their time on their projects. So we'll see.
No. So are there anyone, is like the ending of the anime, they wanted to avoid a fruits basket situation. They gave us an ending.
Just in case they don't work on
Right.
it anymore.
Mm-hmm. So at least they can't say, well, they never finished. So, yeah.
Any other questions or comments?
Let me just mention here that Maddie and Melinda here, they did the heavy lifting as far as the research goes. I did the audiovisual stuff.
Yeah,
It's
good
like,
with that.
so, you know, it's like it's been, you know, so it was really cool. It's like I was finding out things that I didn't know before. So I'm hoping that you all enjoyed it too. So.
Half of these things we actually knew something about. Other stuff we got to learn a lot new stuff too. And we offered Roger, we're like, if you need pictures of things, we'll help you find. But we gave him the info and he just ran with it. And he did a great job putting all this slideshow stuff together to match up with us. So
I regretted not being able to find something of Oberon from the French poem, epic poem you mentioned. But it was way too late after that.
that's okay. I've never seen visuals for it myself, but I mean, I'm sure there's something somewhere, but yeah.
Are there any other theories that anyone has as to what Elias would potentially be?
No one
I
out
kind
here
of like
thinks
the alchemist idea.
He could be a combination of multiple ones.
That or when
Sorry?
if
Oh,
it was
I'm sorry, what? Oh.
Here, what was that?
if it was an experiment gone wrong or a test gone wrong by the alchemist, him remembering human flesh, he could have lost consciousness, lost his memory, and possibly accidentally ate his lab assistant.
Possibly. Again, it's really weird because, again, like the other mages, they're like, there's something in him that's human, but there's something in him that's totally not. And that's kind of what, again, is almost kind of scary about him because Titania and Oberon are like, yeah, we like you, you're a fairy, but you're not quite a fairy. One of the things, this is minorly spoilish-ish, Elias goes on this rampage and he's very upset about something Chise did, and he's just throwing a tantrum. He's constantly called childlike throughout this whole thing. Titania comes to him and tells him, you love like we do, but you are very much human-like. Again, this is just another kind of comparison to how the Fae love so differently, but she and Oberon constantly comment on how he's just not like them. And he even says he doesn't really like being around them because he feels like he's looked down upon because he's not exactly what they are. So it's weird. I think that there's totally a possibility that there's something more alchemic because they make it out like there's a big difference between the alchemists and the mages.
Yeah. Which would be a subject for a whole other panel about magic in Ancient Magus Bride. So we just had to avoid that entirely.
Yeah, I think they used the term sorcerer actually in the translation for the anime, which I thought was too similar to a mage. Alchemist, it focuses more on science and understanding magic, whereas magic's like, hey fairy, you want to help me do some things? And their fairies are like, yeah, cool, and it just kind of happens. So that's the rough of it.
So is someone indicating that maybe see this is the fault of me going to the Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood panel last night, which was an excellent panel. And it's like, so are you implying that Elias might actually be gluttony?
again, I felt like the whole like demon hybrid was something kind of interesting, but again, it's one of those we don't know. There's so much
touched on any of that.
We haven't.
Though. She's never brought up anything in the manga, and they didn't have anything in the anime with demons.
Right.
We do always have a lot of, if we're going to talk about like religions and stuff, just religions in general, and Christianity too. But they never talk about anything as far as angels and fallen angels or anything. They acknowledge that with Simon anyway, that there is a Christian God, because Titania and Oberon do not like him, and they're just like, you worship the other guy, get out of here.
So
we
they
acknowledge
him.
that
They
it
never say
exists,
whether
so
or not the God exists, like in
they
Christianity.
kind of do.
They do, but
Yeah.
they're like
it's very glossed over. So
it's like all these things are possible
so
at
we
the very least.
could
in this
potentially
world.
get into some form of angel or demon being a potential type of fae, I guess.
Potentially, I think it all kind of would fall into a similar category. At least it's not of the
Otherworldly.
human world.
There's also the potential that it could have been just a fey creature and a human that happened to be in the same area when a surge of wild magic kind of like fucked them over and
A radioactive
together.
thing.
No, that would be
It's like fairy
interesting.
mutant.
Figure it out. We
Plans
practice.
this stuff though.
So that would be why.
I
Like,
mean,
maybe he's a little bit
potentially.
fey, a little
At least
bit-
it's just a super mutant fairy.
He could join the X-Men. He's the new Professor X.
Oh my
Well,
God.
he's going to the school. I mean, we have the college arc now, so maybe he does. Well, all right, that's a crossover that I didn't know that I needed with the X-Men and.
We also want to know where you got the
yellow
movie.
suits. I like that one actually.
Any other questions, comments?
Now, I know the other thing that I would just find interesting is like, Yamazaki-san hasn't really specifically talked about it. If there are, if there are any differences between Japanese yokai, or at least or at least types of yokai from Fae. She hasn't truly dwelled with that, but I mean, it's like that might be an interesting thing that she might decide to do. I don't know.
Especially if we're going to possibly demon route, there's the possibility of Elias being some kind of Oni sort of thing, and maybe Oberon and Titania don't know because it's out of their realm of influence. If there's like a different type of
That's kind of why I like the Ash and I too. Like I was like maybe because he's not necessarily of like a European descent, so we're like he might just be something like you said outside of
That's
their island. That's a good
I
one.
like that. I like that. Are we out of time?
We are running out of it, so I'm just
running out
packing
of
up while you
time,
guys
so-
talk. So I mean,
Well,
because
just let you guys
because
talk.
the
It's
next
fine.
person's panel is important too. So.
Everyone's panel is
If that's the case with being outside of the realm of influence, wouldn't the Wendigo?
That's the thing.
Take the
That's
thing
the
as
one
well?
reason I
Yes.
thought the Wendigo
Yes.
or even the Chimera would
Yeah.
be
They're not
possible because
British
they're not
in
British or
origin, yes.
Well, the
European.
Chimera thing though was when it followed because Carter Felix was trying to make the Chimera and they knew what that was. So that,
Potentially.
yeah.
Now, about Kartophilus, I'll just simply say, when I did my first panel, I had a nearly 5-minute thing on Kartophilus because he's a fascinating character.
He really is. And again, there's no real ties to Christianity, says Yamazaki as she writes about the guy who said, look
but
at
once
Jesus carrying the
again-
cross.
But once again, Kartophilus is what I call extra-biblical. It's not in Scripture, but it is a legend that has had a lot of pull over the centuries, particularly in Europe. And it's interesting that every so often, during the Middle Ages, someone would show up and claim to be Kartophilus, also known as the Wandering Jew. And it's kind of like, and it's almost the way the Yamazaki-san kind of seems to be implying that Kartophilus is maintaining his existence by riding along with someone else, which is an interesting take on it.
It's just creepy and messed up.
Well, yes, and well, anytime you have I mean, kids tend to be creepy in anime. Everyone.
Oh, it's got a cute face and little boy shorts? Oh, no. With him.
And it blocks the shadows.
Yeah.
Right?
If we're bringing
Again,
in the
Salem. Salim.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities. This is I think why I started liking it, because I love Full Metal, and I'm just like, ooh, there are a lot of elements in here that I really like. The depth of the story and creatures. So,
Long live King Molly.
There's also the possibility that since they did bring in some, clearly Middle Eastern Greek type roots, that he could be maybe a fallen demigod.
Oh yeah, like I was almost half joking because of all the symbolism. I was like, you know what, Elias just is Jesus.
Look at all the
Well, that's
Egyptian
too far
gods.
of
They
a
all have
stretch.
some
You
form of
could-
animal head to them.
Yeah, but I saw a lot of
Aslan
them.
can be Jesus, then
Sure.
Elias can be Jesus.
Sorry, who?
Aslan from the Chronicles of Narnia.
But the difference is Lewis basically, he deliberately created a Christian allegory, whereas Yamazaki-san, if she's doing it, it's like, oh, no, I don't know anything about this stuff.
I see we have one other comment real quick. I want your take on this. What do you want to
I
add?
actually just had another comment about something
Yes,
that I've mainly about Chisei's family.
Yes.
I've only seen them. I just got the manga, so I haven't read the manga yet. So I don't know if they have anything extra. But on why
We still don't know a whole
her,
lot about them.
why her father and why her father left and took her brother.
Where I am, because I'm not reading ahead, I skipped ahead just enough so I kind of knew what I was supposed to look like today. And I knew about the college arc. But so far as I've read, her dad has not come back into it. We do not know why he left.
It looked like, at least in the anime, that he saw something and
I think
it
that
caused him to
he
leave.
knows something, and he knows someone, and he shouldn't be where he is. I think it's really sad because he was really the only one keeping Chisei and her mother safe. And I think that after he left, eventually Elias would replace Chisei's protecting role.
Right.
I like that. That's the only reason I honestly think that Chisei hasn't been eaten yet is sheer luck and someone is keeping her alive.
Yeah, definitely.
But we need to conclude tonight. I hope that everyone here finds each other and keeps talking, or if you want to come find us and talk to us. I hope that you guys had a great night. I had a great night. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Madeline Monroe with Unhinged Twins.
And I'm Melinda Branford from Unhinged Twins.
You can find us at facebook.com, on Tumblr, and on DeviantArt. If you want commissions for artwork or just to talk, drop us a line.
How do you do? My name is Roger Day. And if you want to contact me, you can find me on Facebook and also on Twitter, Roger Day, D-A-Y. Thank you so much.